So it is 1 o'clock and we're gonna call the finance committee meeting for February 14th, 2024 to order. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are privileged to meet on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Squamish and Scotland nations. With that, there is a agenda recommendation.
That the agenda of this meeting be approved.
Thank you, April. Is there a second for that? Cynthia? Are there any objections? Being hearing none, then we can continue. Okay, and then with that, we have the minutes for recommendation.
That the minutes of the finance committee. Jumped in front of it. That the minutes of the finance committee held on January 17th, 2024 be adopted.
Thank you, April. Second for that one. Somebody?
I have something different for that recommendation.
Lisa's raising that. The second bit.
Oh, there.
Did I read it wrong?
Can we try it again,
For the minutes?
just in case?
That the minutes of the finance committee held on January 17th, 2024 be adopted.
Okay, nope,
Yeah.
yep, nope, all good, sorry. I don't know what I was thinking I heard, but that was not what I thought.
Maybe I read-
Oh my gosh, sorry. I'm happy to second that.
Lisa already did.
Okay,
Are there any objections? Any more? Seeing and hearing them, then that's accepted. Are there any trustee items for finance? Think so. There are no presentations. So that brings us to our information items, the 2024-2025 budget development survey results overview. That's again.
More to me, yep. So I'm just gonna pull up the document here and just go through a summary of this here. So just give me a second. Okay, so this document summarizes the budget survey results. So I'm just gonna go through that. So this is where it starts on the first, second page. This is just asking, what your relationship is with the district, and as you can see, the majority of respondents are parents and guardians and staff. The next section is what community do you live in? As you can see, the majority is in Squamish, but there's good representation across the district. The next one is just which school site applies to you. So you can see it looks like we got representation across the district again here. So these are, I think, pretty much in order. They go like this way. So you can see who the respondents are. And then we get into the meat of the survey. So the first section is specifically around facilities. So what I'm going to do is, what I've done is I've grouped for the responses, anything that's satisfied, somewhat satisfied, and neutral to kind of together. And then dissatisfied and, somewhat dissatisfied and dissatisfied, and then not applicable for the upcoming questions. So in relation to building conditions, for these three areas, so satisfied, somewhat satisfied, and neutral, it makes up about 67%. And then dissatisfied and somewhat dissatisfied to building conditions, it makes up 33%. Let's go to the next one here.
Are we able to, I'm sure you are, see where the dissatisfied lie, which buildings?
Oh, I'd have to look at that.
That'll come out in the end.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that'd be in camera?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Details, thank you. Yeah, and just on that for the public, so if folks are referencing specific school sites, it's potential for identifying who and how many, especially if it's a small number or a large number, and so
Mm.
just out of courtesy for folks who work in those buildings and whatnot, we will do those pieces
Yeah,
but it'll help us in our discussion further when the rest of our partner group meeting in terms of if there's some priorities and some priority sites, that will help inform all of that.
yeah, and that's why we kept it at a summary level too. We don't want to anyone to be offended or hurt by anything. Okay. Okay, so the next one is on how satisfied are you with condition grounds? And so these three categories again, satisfied, somewhat satisfied, and neutral, it makes up 72%. And 28% indicated either dissatisfied or somewhat dissatisfied. Conditions of grounds. The next question is playgrounds and outdoor equipment. And so these three categories again, the satisfied, somewhat satisfied, and neutral make up 70%. And then the dissatisfied or somewhat dissatisfied is 22%. And not applicable is 8%. The next question is how satisfied are you with parking? And these three categories again, satisfied, somewhat satisfied, and neutral makes up 64%. 34% make up somewhat dissatisfied and dissatisfied, and then we got 2% that's not applicable. So those are probably people that are walking. The next question is how satisfied are you with building capacity and space? And this one's interesting. So for the three categories, satisfied, somewhat satisfied, and neutral, it makes up 54%. Whereas 45% makes up dissatisfied or somewhat dissatisfied. And then a small 1% makes up the not applicable. The next one is around student safety. So for those three categories again here, that one equals 60%, the satisfied, somewhat satisfied, and neutral. And 34% for dissatisfied and somewhat dissatisfied. And then for not applicable, 6%. Next one is around transportation. So this question specifically, did I skip one for you? How satisfied are you with the accessibility of the transportation? Oh, I accidentally forgot to write this one down. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to summarize this page. So you can see here, these three. It's under 50%. And then 36% are saying not applicable, so that's for accessibility of transportation. Okay, how satisfied are you with communications regarding transportation? So this one is also under 50%. But there's quite a few that are saying not applicable. So those are people who wouldn't be using buses, probably. So it's almost the same as the top one. So those are people whose either children aren't using buses or they're not applicable for them. That could be for staff. Okay, this next one is how satisfied are you with the effectiveness of the transportation system? So these three categories again it's totaled at 43%. Even though that looks low, there's still 38% saying it's not applicable to them, and 19% are saying dissatisfied and somewhat dissatisfied. And then recruitment and retention of bus drivers. So those three categories, satisfied, somewhat satisfied, and neutral, that makes up 33%. Whereas dissatisfied and somewhat dissatisfied makes up 29%. And then we have a 38% not applicable, so it's actually higher than the other categories. Okay, so now we're moving away from facilities and transportation into student programming. So this one, how satisfied are you with the availability of educational programs and opportunities? So for those three categories, again, satisfied, somewhat satisfied, and neutral, that makes up 63%. And 32% dissatisfied or somewhat dissatisfied, and 5% not applicable. The next one is on student support services. So for these three categories, the satisfied, somewhat satisfied, and neutral, it's 33%. 29% is either dissatisfied or somewhat satisfied, and well, that doesn't look right. It's saying 7% is not applicable here. Well, this is actually more like 50% here is somewhat satisfied and dissatisfied. Okay, we'll go to learning resources here. How satisfied are you with access to site-based learning resources? So for these three categories, you can kind of see here, it almost takes up 75% of the grid, but it's 76% for access to site-based learning resources. So yeah, 76% people are satisfied, somewhat satisfied, or neutral. So overall, people are pretty satisfied with that. And 18% are dissatisfied or somewhat dissatisfied, 6% not applicable. The next one is, how satisfied are you with access to educational technology? And this one is. Which one? So this is, you can kind of see the three again here. It's almost 75%. Actually, it's exactly 75%. The three satisfied, somewhat satisfied, and neutral, it's 75% are satisfied pretty much. And then there's about 16% here that are dissatisfied or somewhat dissatisfied, and 9% is not applicable. And now still on the learning resources side, how satisfied are you with learning and instructional materials? So this one is, you can kind of see here again. It's, so we got 18% and 14% here. It's probably like 60%. There's a 5% here, not applicable. Okay, and then the next one is physical learning environment. So for these three categories, it's 71% satisfied or somewhat satisfied, neutral. And then 23% are dissatisfied or somewhat dissatisfied, and 6% are, it's not applicable. And that just comes to the last question. Is how satisfied are you with opportunities for parent and community partnerships? And overall, with three categories, you can see it's quite large. It's about 85%. People are satisfied with that. And 8 people are dissatisfied or somewhat dissatisfied, and 7%. So I'm going to stop sharing and just see if anybody has any questions around that. Okay.
I do. So you would take those results. And then. From there, see what changes maybe we need to make and allocate budget accordingly. Is that the intent?
Yeah, so basically like, we'll talk about it a bit here, but like, we'll be sending out some more detailed information to our partner groups about what the results were. And so like you can see like some of them, for like instance, some people might not be as satisfied with parking. Well, that might be something that we want to adjust in our budget for next year. Say, well, we need to make more parking spaces or to fix our paving, depending on the situation.
So can I answer that?
Yeah.
So
you bet.
thank you. No, I really appreciate the question, you know, just to remind the public and everyone that this is one aspect of getting feedback. So this is the initial survey that went up for everyone. Next week is, and I know you can, it's on the agenda, you'll go over it, is the district partner meeting with everyone. He has, Daniel had shared, we have a slightly different tweak to how we're sharing information. Rather than have everyone have all the data and have to kind of mad scramble with facilitation at the table groups. What we decided was that ahead of time, we will be sending out and giving to the partner groups that are representing their specific groups, the data for them, which that came out of the survey, so that they have a chance to take a look and go, does this match or coincide with what we've been hearing from the field? Because the ask of our district partners were to have those conversations with their groups that they're coming to represent as much of a wide range of sentiment as possible, and to ensure that they have a sense of what priorities are from their specific groups. So by giving them data for their groups ahead of time, some groups did participate higher than others. So just provide that opportunity to make sure they're coming with as much information as possible. And we think that will be very well received to have that kind of stuff ahead of time. And we also recognize we'll adjust timing to get that into the hands of folks even sooner. Because we're going to be giving people about a week. Take a look, and we know more time is always appreciated.
Yeah.
So when we do the partner feedback and we take all that information, everybody, when folks have the opportunity to let us know what they would like to prioritize based on functional needs, then we'll have a more fulsome picture of discussions at the board table for the board to consider. So,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just thought the public might benefit from hearing.
Clarity, yes, for sure. And of course, after the district partner meeting, we will report out to public as well, at another board meeting, what the overall findings are and the next steps.
Great, thank you. Anything else, Danielle? Oh, thanks, Celeste.
So I was just curious how happy you were with the response rate.
Yeah, I can't remember. I didn't write it down, but I think we actually had more than last year, like 200 and something responses. So it was good. Really good to have to hear that. And the other,
I'd like more though, still.
Yeah, it
But
feels kind of low,
some
but at least it was
some-
spread out.
yeah, we got a
some
bit
groups
more.
Weren't as much as we
Some
would have
groups,
hoped, so we
yeah.
need to work to
That's
invite more involvement, I think.
Yeah, so when people did fill it out, like at each section, we did have some open spaces for people to put in comments, and we had quite a few comments, I think over 500. So that was interesting. So yeah, so I was surprised to see how much there was there. Yeah,
That's the good stuff.
the helpful stuff. Yeah.
Was it, were the questions or the comments, for clarification or?
No, I mean, sometimes there's like a huge variety of comments. So sometimes they weren't even related to the section, so.
Okay, I was just curious if the questions could be clearer, if they weren't quite understanding.
It was-
My only.
No, it was just a section that said, do you have anything else you'd like to add? When people did the survey.
Right.
So people would just say, I'd like to, they might have a specific complaint or something that they wanted us to be aware of.
Or an
Yeah.
ask.
Or an ask.
So, and that information disaggregated for privacy, of course, is being shared with the representatives coming to the board meeting, so they'll see the specific things being asked. Because I think it's super helpful for people to clarify what they mean, and I think we will, after the fact, ask for some feedback about how we can do better. Because you know, anytime, again, we can be more clear and specific on what we're asking for, the better the results are gonna be, so that we're hearing.
Okay, thanks. Celeste?
Yeah, so I wanted to, this was just a little bit of feedback. So I find pie graphs to be a bit difficult to interpret. And so just for future, my feedback on the presentation, and thank you, this was a lot of work. So thank you for the work that went into it, Danielle. But I wonder if it might be helpful to use bar graphs. I could see even like a stacked bar graph with the sort of negative, somewhat unsatisfied and unsatisfied on one together, and then the, maybe neutral in the middle, however you want to do it, but bar graphs. And one of the reasons why I'm recommending bar graphs is because it might help longitudinally when we're looking at this data year to year to be able to look at bar graphs side to side from year to year. And the other request that I would give is if not applicable as one of the categories, to just take them out and then have the percentages represent all of the people that responded to that particular question. Yeah, and I think being able to, like, we're getting better every year that we do this. I think that it gets better. But I think really, like, when we can get more sophisticated and start looking year to year, looking at what we did in terms of resource allocation and then how that impacted the results in subsequent years might be interesting.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback. Let's take a look and see. I like the idea of the bar graph. See what we
Yeah, I would actually even build on that. That's fantastic, but to show last year.
can.
So we can see comparatively, and then we can, and then to see outcomes and report on those. It's like,
Mhm.
just for our partner groups to see that there's value in their participation
Mhm.
in the process, and that there are changes that happen because of it, or improvements that.
Mhm.
But I totally agree that compared to a couple of years ago or a few years ago, like we have improved
Okay.
on the process entirely.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any hands waving up there? So is that, we're good to move on? Thank you. Oh, you're good to move. Discussion items, the partner group meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just so we have the agenda attached there. And I just wanted to see if anybody had any feedback on the agenda. I can pull it up if that makes it easier, or just look at it.
May I just share? One of the things we wanted to ensure was that fulsome time together, and to provide time for the welcome and the food blessing to be done in a good way, while still ensuring that there's the time to work together at the table groups. So we would normally start it at 5, but we wanted to build in 15 minutes for the welcome and food blessing, because we didn't want folks to feel rushed. By the same token, we didn't want to take away the table talk time. We know people really look forward to that, and that's the meat of it. And really the purpose is to hear from one another after the lovely welcome and blessing. So we do recognize that it makes the day a little bit longer, but then we also decided we would serve dinner before beginning. So again, welcome, food blessing, people grab their food and people can eat while there's the welcome and introductions and sort of a working dinner for folks. Sort of give them 20 minutes or 35 minutes to eat, and if they're still chewing, that's fine. But we really wanted to ensure people did get fed, felt they were fed, and then did the work, because we know in past years we waited for dinner till the end, and then folks were really hungry, and we lost a few people who just wanted to get home. So we're hoping that these adjustments are a little more humane.
Right. That being said, I really follow my calendar, so we need to change that, because I've had it in my head
At 5.
5 o'clock, yeah. So if we're starting a welcome and food blessing at 4:45, then I probably need to be there a little before that.
So again, will that work for?
It makes
It'll
sense.
still work? Okay, good, thank you. We know it's short notice, and in future
Yeah.
years we'll want to do it, I think, this way instead, to allow for that time.
I think what you're saying, was there a calendar invite put out to all of the people in the partners groups?
Not yet.
Or is that just, this is the invite that we're listening.
It's
So
right
one-
at the end.
Okay.
So once-
not an electronic
Once we
also,
approve
okay.
this
Yes.
plan, then we'll email the partner groups because we want to make sure that, like, we're listening to your feedback, right? That's
Okay.
the reason we're having this discussion is because if you said that doesn't work, then we would, because we're not going to email them out before we've decided, right?
Okay.
So we'll be emailing them out after this. So basically what's gonna
Some
happen,
of the partner groups have been sending out information because I have received a couple of questions,
oh,
in particular the Indigenous representation.
mhm,
So. Just so you know, if they're saying 5 o'clock, so.
oh,
Maybe it's just memory from
from last.
the year prior, and so,
Mhm.
I don't think so.
okay,
It was Julie Lavarge.
Okay,
So she received something from the Indigenous Education Committee indicating she was gonna reach out and she did say 5 o'clock.
oh. Okay, who's the sooner? We'll check on that.
5 o'clock. That's why I was questioning it, like,
Yes, yes,
so we can easily change that.
yes.
yeah,
But we have to ensure we get that out to everybody.
yeah, just
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
say that there's
Thank
been a change and highlighted and stuff.
perfect.
So, yeah, so thanks for letting me know that. I didn't know. Okay. Yeah, so basically what we're gonna have, an Indigenous welcoming from the north and the south. And, sorry, I think it's starting with the food blessing, then a welcoming, I can't remember exactly. And then we'll eat. And people can kind of get settled, and then Chris and I will jump into our stuff. And the one change this year is Chris is going to be doing the countdown and I'm gonna be a facilitator. So at one of the tables, so, yeah. That's great. Any other feedback on the agenda at all?
And then are we spreading, and the past trustees out around
Yes.
the different tables?
Yes, we did, as before, we tried to do our best to ensure we have representation from
Yeah.
the stakeholder group at each table.
Okay. And do we have all trustees participating?
No, I believe Rachel's unable to make it. And I think everyone else is able to though.
Okay.
Possibly, yeah. I think there's 6.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, so everyone's good with the agenda there then? And the next section is just a note about the results distribution. I think Chris already mentioned that, but basically jumped ahead there, that's okay. So we are gonna be consolidating the results by partner group and sending out that partner groups, like filtering it, but that partner group will be sending them what their results and comments and stuff like that were resulted in. And so that they can actually come knowing like their group's feedback. And then we will have like the whole feedback there at the session. But I think it would be good because they're there to represent that section of people, right? So if everybody's okay with that, after this meeting, we will be sending out emails to the partner groups with that information along with the change in the schedule.
Can we see that just out of curiosity? Like, can we see like an example of what they're getting?
Oh, sure. We can like blind carbon
Yeah.
copy on it.
Yeah, I'd be
of course.
curious to
Sure.
see what they're
Great
seeing.
idea.
It also will help us to just, I don't know, be ready for.
Yeah, sure. We could definitely do that. It's a good
And
idea.
again, the cunning plan is that if you have the teachers and parents. And it looks like, oh, our 3 to 5 top things were X. Oh, that was the same as yours. Oh, how about the others? And it just makes the facilitation, the conversation smoother and better. And yeah, we're in agreement. We'd really like the board to consider X.
Okay. Good. Thank you, everyone.
Other questions or comments? None, then move on to our 2023-2024 amended annual budget and. Danielle and Alana?
Yeah, so before I'm going to pass it over to Lena, I just wanted to thank everybody for being patient and allowing us the time to go through our budget and get it right. So we did spend quite a bit of time refining our amended budget. And so it was a very collaborative effort. We worked closely with all the directors and executive staff here, so we spent many hours actually trying to make it work. So I just wanted everybody to be aware of that. So I'm gonna leave it off with Elena. She's gonna go and present the amended budget to you for 23-24. So that's the current year that we're in. And she's gonna be going over the changes from the preliminary budget. So the preliminary budget's the budget we passed in June 2023. And so she'll be going over any changes from that budget. So you go ahead, Elena.
Thank you, Danielle. I will start sharing the screen. And there were 4 attachments to the agenda: summary, details, and infographics, and also the budget bylaw. So, and here on the screen is a summary of the amended budget, comparing to the preliminary budget on the red. From our projected enrollment, there was change of 88.75 student enrollment. And once preliminary budget was based on those projections, so 88.75 more students resulted almost 1.7 more million operating grant. This also was complemented to changes in unique student needs funding and other supplemental funding for the total of almost 2.4 million increase in operating fund. Operating grant changes that are coming from February and May student count haven't been calculated yet, and the district expects 47.875 more FTE on those counts, which will bring an additional 0.3 million of funding.
Can I interject quickly, just for the clarification for the public and the board?
Yeah, yeah.
The February, May enrollment covers both any new students to the district. It also covers the online portion. So we have a policy to ensure our students are getting an additional credit for a digital portfolio class, and that gets claimed between February and May, which results in some of the increased FTE. So just as clarification for why would we suddenly think we had 48 new full-time students in the district? That's not what that represents. That represents an amalgamation of 0.11, what is it? Oh my goodness, I'm losing my memory now. Of a block, whatever that is, but it's 0.14.
1 to 5.
Thank you, 0.125 of an FTE of a student. So it takes 8 of them to 8 blocks to make one student. So this is representative of, again, a number of students taking a number of online courses that we claim by May. So just that clarification, just people think, oh my gosh, where are those 47 students going and how are they fitting into classrooms? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Yes, operating grants are based on enrollment, and enrollment defined by student count, which happens 4 times a year. The biggest chunk is in September, and 62.2 million is based on the September count and projections that we made last year. But we expect more students in February and May count. It is mostly for online students, additional courses, new courses since September. And also, if there is increase on overall for the district special needs, like student unique needs, then the district may receive additional funding, but we don't budget for that. So the total 62.5 million operating grant. This operating grant includes 1.2 million local education agreement with Lillooet Nation. The funding for that will be coming from the nation directly and not from the means. Next section is international revenue and other revenues. So international student enrollment is budgeted 15.95 FTE, or 264,000 less comparing to preliminary budget. Other revenues include 1 million of labor settlement, same amount as was budgeted in preliminary budget, and also 470 8,000 more from other revenues that include interest earned on bank accounts, BC trade funding, ministry initiatives, and revenues from other districts. Next section is special purpose funds. The district is receiving about 9.3 million of special purpose funding. The 662,000 increase from preliminary budget is mostly due to the fact that certain funds, such as tripartite transportation agreement, mental health in schools, seamless day kindergarten, and also group of special purpose funds for early education, are not normally budgeted in preliminary budgets and only on amended budgets when announced in fall. Comparing to preliminary budget, the increase in the revenues is 3.1 million. And the district will also use carry forward from prior year to balance the budget. So 321,000 is a carry forward from prior year in special purpose grants. 922,000 is operating restricted funding. And also unrestricted operating 500,000. The total.
Sir, do you mind if I just jump in? So I just want to make sure everyone understands that. So this 1.4 million here that she has on the left there. So 900,000 of that's restricted funds that we've internally restricted. And then where it says unrestricted, that 500,000, that's basically the amount that we're pulling out of our surplus funds to fund this current year. So we had to do that to make it work this year, and we're going to be looking closer so we don't want to keep chipping away at our surplus funds. So we're looking at ways to continually, hopefully throughout the year, even reduce that, but we had to put it in like that for right now. So we're hoping that we don't have to use that much, and we're looking at ways to reduce that internally, but I just wanted to point that out to you, so that's what that $500,000 is, that will be coming out of our unrestricted surplus.
Thank you. Denise.
Yeah.
Yes. The total prior year surpluses appropriation is 1.7 million, which is 800,000 less than the preliminary budget and almost $1 million less than the prior year amended budget. So we are appropriating less to keep our unrestricted surplus healthy. Yes, the district made the following allocations of these revenues. Total revenues, again, including appropriation, is 79, almost 0.2 million. And allocation goes as the following. So 51.6 million was allocated to schools. This is almost 4.2 million more than was allocated to schools in preliminary budget, and 1.1 million more than the total revenue increase in amended budget. So leave provisions here is 680,000 more than in preliminary budget, and we budgeted them at the level of 2022-23 actuals, because they keep going up significantly over the last 3 years, and we budget more realistically in this budget. As a result of these changes, this biggest allocations, the district had to find efficiencies to balance the rest of the budget and to keep accumulated operating unrestricted surplus at the required level at the end of the year. Educational services, let me see. Here we go. Educational support services had a 104,000 increase from preliminary budget, while district and operations, maintenance, and transportations both had $500,000 each decrease. With the overall allocation of 79.2 million and unallocated contingency of 40,000 that will be added back to the accumulated operating unrestricted surplus, the total operating unrestricted surplus is expected to be at approximately 1.43 5% of our operating expenses. And now we can look in more details of these allocations and to see some staffing changes on the next page. If you have questions on this portion. Daniel and Chris clarified a lot, but maybe there are some more.
I think Celeste has a question for you.
Yeah, I just had a quick question for whomever feels like answering it. So leave provisions, can you just explain a little bit more what that would include? Is that just sick leave, or are we talking maternity leaves, like any sort of leave that a person might take?
It's all kind of paid leaves. Majority of it is sick leave. We still have some maternity leaves, but they are what they are, and they not affected by the fact that people get sick now. Any paid leaves that are according to collective agreements have to be paid, and people have a right to take days off, leave provisions expense. And I would say that the majority of it is sick time.
And I think it's fair to say, and this is something that we're seeing across the sector, folks are actually taking care of themselves post-COVID, and that encouragement to stay home when sick has been heard loud and clear. And then as a result, our costs for sick leave provisions have gone up dramatically since prior to COVID, which is why we're seeing these big numbers, 3.2 million last year, and we're already at 2.9 this year. In previous years, pre-COVID, that would have been what, about 1.8
or 1.7.
Yeah, so we're looking at $1 million more, and that cost, rightfully so, we want to take care of our people, but that cost is borne by the district, and that has an impact on the bottom line, which is why we're speaking to where we're trying to trim down to ensure that we're doing a great job supporting our folks, and also why we're not borrowing, we're reallocating, to use the right term, I think that is, from unrestricted surplus. End of the day, the surplus from last year, other years, we do want that to be spent on the current year and spent on programs, while ensuring that we're still keeping a 1 to 3, is that right? 1 to 4% unallocated. So we're hovering over the 1, but not too far. But I just want folks to be aware, full transparency, that's the biggest new challenge for us, and same across all districts. But again, the wellness of our staff is super important. Thank you.
I'm just curious, when you calculate the sick leave, is that a combination of what it costs to have the person who's taking the leave, their wage covered, plus the person who's going in to cover their position covered? Like, is that how you calculate? How do you calculate that?
So what's sitting in there is the cost of that person's day.
Okay.
That called in sick, that person's day. The schools are covering the TTOC cost. But they don't get charged that person that day. But anyways, to make it simpler, that is the cost of the actual sick person's.
Okay, so that doesn't include the cost of having someone come in to cover that person.
Not in there.
Is that in that 2.9 million?
Go ahead.
Okay, that doesn't make sense to me.
I know. I think we have to
We've
clarify
already-
for,
You want,
no, you go ahead.
so we've already budgeted for the teacher's salary. So that money's already there.
Yes.
So the sick leave is only covering the additional cost
Okay,
of covering the person who's sick.
okay, so the
That's what
TTC's
paying
wage
for it was.
is somewhere else. Okay,
Yes.
that makes sense.
And because
The
of
salary,
state-
the salary. So,
That's
Yeah.
right. And because of the request from everyone to take care of oneself and whatnot, we're just seeing, we know people come to work when they're sick or have in the
Mhm.
past because they want to be there for the kids, which is
Mhm.
lovely. But we also know the importance of taking care of yourself, and under the encouragement from Bonnie Henry and others to please stay home when sick.
Mhm.
Again, folks have taken that to heart, but it is having an incredible impact. And as we hire more and more folks, then there's more opportunity for folks, unfortunately, to be ill and then to be away. So we're doing tracking of our historical levels so that we can better try and plan for future and just go in eyes open. I had hoped it was gonna maybe start to ease off and ease down, but it's staying pretty standard and that's okay, as long as we're aware of that and adjust accordingly. So we're not funded for sick leave is what I should say. We take that out of our budget. Like, yes, it's part of the grants and everything else. So we budget accordingly.
Yeah.
But if it goes up by $1 million or doubles, then that money does come from somewhere else.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Back to me.
Yep, sorry, go ahead.
So I just debated how I want to say this. This sounds like it might be an area of advocacy across school districts because the costs are being borne and eventually it's going to chip away at what we're able to offer. So it ought to be something that's on the province's radar.
Yes.
And thank you for that, Celeste, and that might be a good idea for something to bring forward to AGM as like a
Yeah,
request
that's
for
what I was
funding sick
thinking.
leave. Yeah.
Because this is real. I mean, we have the numbers the trend is clear
Absolutely.
and it's not going to change. I actually have one more unrelated question. If we have time. Sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So can you just remind me, I know that we've probably been through this, but we have that pot of unrestricted surplus. How much is in there? Off the top of your head. Sorry, Lynn.
So at the end of at the end of 22-23 school year,
Maybe just wait a second. Just gotta mute it.
I'm sorry, I forgot my charger.
It died. Yeah, it's okay.
Died on my laptop.
No, share discussion.
You didn't know?
While we're waiting
Sure.
for
Sorry about
technology, I have a
Um,
question.
at the end of 22-23 year, we had $1,593,592 of accumulated operating unrestricted surplus. 500,000 we appropriate for to balance this budget and 40,000 unallocated contingencies added back. So there, at the end of the year, we expect to have 1,133,000.
So that's a significant, like we've taken that it's unsustainable to do this into the future,
Exactly.
basically.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing that I noticed on one of the sheets was that interest rates have definitely been in our favor. But clearly it's not enough because it was like 300,000 or 400,000 increase in interest for this year from the prior year, but that's still, even with that, we still have to take 500,000 from an unallocated surplus. Okay, thanks.
Just gonna jump in. I think Lisa has a question. Lisa, just, or for, Lisa, Rachel and Melissa, when we're screen sharing, we can't see you.
Oh, hi.
Oh.
I can't get to the little hand. You can't add your hand when you're screen sharing either, so I can't let you know.
No, that's not your fault. That's just the technology.
Yeah, just
So,
make
go-
yourself known.
Go ahead, jump in.
You're okay if I ask a couple?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the section A of allocation of revenues. So the 2023 preliminary budget, we hadn't budgeted anything for line item 12, 13, 14, and prior year school surpluses. So is that just because we got the funding to do the Ready, Set, Learn and now it's being expensed? Is that?
You're referring to preliminary budget 23-24, is that right, Lisa?
Well, if you look at the actual budget now as of for today, the yellow column on section A, what page is that on? Section A, line 12, 13. There's one there for the OLEP French grant, the Community Link grant, and the district initiatives. So we hadn't budgeted anything. Is that just because we got grant funding and now we're offsetting it?
This is because those are mostly special purpose funds that we normally allocate in the fall.
Okay, thank you.
And preliminary budgets for school allocations, it's mostly per student allocation of operating grants. And also for special needs and unique student needs. So this section and classroom enhancement fund, those funds are in preliminary books. And
Right.
for the fall, schools get some additional special purpose funds once calculated, and budgets for those funds are created.
Okay.
Yeah, just to add to what Elena's saying, so for some of those things, we don't actually know them until the fall because we don't get a letter from the ministry letting us know what they are. And in fact, we haven't even gotten a letter for the French one yet. It just showed up in one of our funding tables, so we knew what it was.
Okay.
Yeah, so it just depends on when the ministry releases that information to us.
And
Okay,
again,
so-
so you're correct, and we do that, again, to be very cautious and have a very conservative initial preliminary budget, because we don't, there are some grants we can assume that we're going to get, but the ones that we don't want to put them in just in case. And again, it's always best to have a conservative budget where you're hiring people than being over budgeting and the opposite. So that's why all of our preliminary budgets will always be quite a bit lower than subsequent budgets.
Okay.
So you're
And
correct.
then if I may just segue on to two of those. So in looking at the budget for where we have tried to, where the administration has tried to reduce some of those spending, I noticed one of the biggest ones we've got there is on section E, line 5 for utilities and buildings and portables and renovations at $500,000, almost 400,000. So are we creating, like all of these ones we've reduced quite significantly, like we've reduced our budget 400,000 on operations, we've reduced it 400,000 on district, like governance, education, international education, instruction and leadership team, and also in section D, we've taken a decent chunk out of professional development. So I just want to make sure that we're, how much of an impact do you see that being on the duct tape, as we would be suggesting, I think through Celeste, that we start lobbying for some things, because we've got projects that need to occur and have to occur to ensure that we can have the students in the buildings. So I just want to point out, to make sure people are seeing that work has been done to reduce items, and congratulations, you've done great work here. Like you've found a lot of room to wiggle. And I respect that and appreciate it. But when I see $500,000 being reduced out of one thing, going, hang on, why were we off on that budget? What are we impacting? If that's okay to ask.
I was going to talk about this line a little bit later, but thank you for anticipating my remark. Just before I say about utilities and buildings, I just wanted to mention also about section A, school allocation, prior year surpluses, that the same like few special purpose grants also never appear on preliminary budgets because school year is not over and we don't know surpluses yet. So this almost 300,000 always budgeted only in amended budget. For the section D, there was no reduction, there was increase, in fact. So educational support saw increase in funding allocation. And about E section, operation maintenance, that's the biggest decrease was actually not that big, because this section 5, line 5, utilities building includes portable and renovations, where we normally budget local capital projects. And we had 450,000 of Whistler washroom renovation, which we advocated to the ministry we requested to use our restricted capital fund to use for those, for that project. So that this line saw such a big increase because 425,000 was approved for us to use from restricted capital. So it went out of our operating. So that's why such a big decrease.
Wait, would you mind just scrolling up just one more second to the educational support? So where I mean that we're removing things, I'm going to assume that we got some more grant funding for line item 5 for Indigenous education. But if you look at the other line items, educational support programs, 3 has been reduced, Community Link has been reduced, other initiatives and early learning programs have been reduced from the original budget.
You want me to talk about Indigenous ed?
That's
yes.
what I was meaning. Like, is that how we're pulling things
Yeah,
to make
so
the budget work?
So when we first do the original budget, we do it based on what we think and like our estimate of what the enrollment is going to be for Indigenous students. And then at the end of the year, we find out how much of the targeted funds were not spent. So when we actually did the first original budget, we didn't know how much was going to be unspent. So what we do is when we do the fall amended budget, we add back in the unspent amount of the targeted funds, so it can still be used by the North and the South. So what was unused from last year was $327,210. So that's why you'll see that increase, because we
Okay.
don't find that out until our audit is complete, which is in the summer.
Okay, thank you. I'm good with it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for questions. Also, those 2 lines with negative differences for Community Link and French grant, they are negative only because they are special purpose funds. And on preliminary budget, we estimate how much carry forward we would have, but we had much less carry forward. We spent more last year, so the carry forward was less. Thus, a less amount was added to current year budget, so the less allocated to spend. So it entirely depends, special purpose funds entirely depend on how much carry forward they have from prior.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, this is the allocation review. If there are no more questions, I can switch to details.
I think there's one more.
Oh, there's one
I'm
more.
so
Okay.
sorry, and
Sure.
I'll try to be brief. So just tying this all together, what I'm curious about is whether our partner groups are aware that we have used like 30% of our unrestricted surplus to make things work this year, and how that might impact allocation in the future, and what we're discussing at our partner group meeting might not be solving everyone's problems, but making very, very hard decisions about where the limited amount of money that we actually have is going to go. Like, is that clear? Because this is sounding like we are going to have to make some really tough, people are going to have to
Yeah.
make some tough decisions.
Yes, yeah, no, that's a really good point. And, Chris and I, when we do our opening for the partner group meeting, we'll add something in about that, because I think
Yes.
that's an
This is like
excellent
a
point.
big deal.
Yeah, it's a
Yes,
big deal,
yes.
100%.
Yep.
Mhm.
Agreed.
We have very little time left. I just wanted to go through some details, mostly staffing changes. And the biggest changes, like I highlighted here, are there were few that we hired new food coordinator for the food program. It's a new special purpose fund, like 0.7 FTE this year. Also, there was a slight reduction in learning services, which was 0.396 FTE, which was complemented by 0.2 increase in mental health coordinator, and also 1.2 FTE increase in ILT team. The rest budget areas didn't see any differences in any changes in staffing, except for annual proration due to hiring timing. And elementary counseling, we have 1.2 more. mental health coordinators, no change here, no change in technology support. 1.2 more in LT team. Having a little rearrangement between principal and teacher, and Indigenous education staffing is not coming from targeted, it's all our district expense. Our food coordinator, fully funded by special purpose grant. Early learning, all special purpose grants. Range as well, no changes in operations, maintenance, transportation, staffing, plant maintenance. We had a reduction, or we had little increase in custodian, but still down with bus drivers, despite all our efforts. And the rest, staffing had no changes. Almost. The international team didn't see any changes, and instructional leadership didn't see any changes, and business services are all the same team, except the person was hired a little bit later in the year. Any questions here? Not hearing anything. Okay. And then infographics just represent all these numbers visually. Our students, sources of revenue, more than 85% from the Ministry of Education. Our bar of enrollment and revenue and expenses, which probably scale should be increased already. You're going up, pushing up, and students are flat. Enrollment. Operating budget expenditure shows all these areas, B, C, D, like transportation, district, educational services as a percentages. In this graph, if you have, maybe let's have some recommendation how to do those graphs.
No,
Because it's been shown this way for quite a while. So that's all from me. If you have questions about budget.
Cynthia?
This question isn't specific to our budget, but I'm curious about whether other districts that see really big jumps in their enrollment, do they seem to have the same budget challenges? Because, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
If it does it, do you make, because I hate to think about children's, which is making money, but they do bring in revenue.
There's a
but then you have to staff.
correlation. That
So
was-
there's the fine point where if you're a district with increased enrollment, you tend to have more monies because there's so many kids you need to have a teacher, and then the rest is gravy. Maybe is a bad way of putting it, but I think with the leave provision challenges though, I'm not sure that's helpful anymore. We can share, it was in the public, I won't name the districts just for their sake, but in the interior, a growing district, they had 4 times more leaves than they were budgeting for, and had to find an additional $8 million out of their budget. So it's, and they're not the only one. I think last year, another metro district, again, had a significantly higher number to find in this time of year. So it's an increasing challenge across the corridor, or across the sector. And you know, to Salah's point, I think it is something that can be raised as lobby. I will share that superintendents certainly have with ministry, just looking at other ways to ensure funding, because whether you're a centralized or decentralized district, the pot of money is the same, right? At the end of the day, it all comes from the same source. And of course, when you're restricted, you can't touch it. But at the end of the day, district costs, board costs have gone up significantly than before. I really appreciate all the increases that the ministry has provided, however, to help defray some of those increased costs, especially around fuel costs, construction, monies for labor settlements, et cetera. But in aggregate, I'm not confident that we're keeping pace.
May,
Curiosity would be behind the human resource aspect, like how, if you have leave like that, then you need to fill those. You need your TTOC.
That's right. And then what we're finding is, and we've chatted about this before, when you have what we call failure to fill, and then you have to have coverage. So we know that our schools in the past have had to pull quite a number of folks, some specialist teachers, non-enrolling librarians, administration to cover classes. I will say that in the South specifically, that has gotten way better. Again, HR has been on we're constantly hiring, and we're actually seeing almost full coverage when folks are away, which is a good news story. But I do want to recognize that it continues to be a challenge in the North to find coverage all the time. So thank you for bringing that up, because while again, we really want to encourage people to take care of their wellness, when we don't have the TOCs, the on-call folks, for EA, et cetera, to fill in, that does take an extra toll on the people in the building who still want to ensure that, you know, they're providing good service to kids. So it's a combination, and we know there is, I was going to speak to it later in our comments in the board meeting around what we learned from the partner group, but the ongoing recruitment and retention for staff in schools across the province, across Canada, across the world is a real thing.
may I?
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
So forgive my ignorance of new, but when collective agreements are made and provisions are made for what staffing costs are staffing costs not supposed to be in totality remitted? In theory, in my layman brain of inexperience here, my expectation would have been that the province would be helping to offset those leave requests. And I can see April now, she's shaking her head. But is that, I think, where some messaging and languaging, if we aren't getting that funding to pay for the contract that has been put before us all, is that not where we should be putting the lobbying?
So may I just, as April had said, those are binding agreements between employment groups and government. And once those are signed, that's law. So we're coming up to another round of bargaining, and at the provincial level, of which we are not engaged in, or trustees are on the table, that may or not be brought up. But at the end of the day, once we sign contracts, off we go for the next whatever while. So I hear what you're saying, but again, those discussions are above my pay grade.
But to add to what you're saying, Lisa, like it would be great for the trustees to advocate for extra funding for sick leave, because every single school district, I wouldn't be surprised if other school districts do this too. They put something through, you know, I won't be surprised to see if there's other motions in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Any other questions or comments? Celeste?
I just had one that I wanted to bring up. Okay, so I think that it is in the budget detail document. So I'm looking at learning services and then FTEs. And so I just wanted to highlight for the public, this is something that I feel like comes up very, very often. So I'm going to say it out loud, and I don't necessarily expect an answer today, but I think it would be helpful if there was some discussion at this table for the benefit of the public about what I'm going to say. So looking at school psychology services, we have 2.75 FTEs. All of those positions are currently filled. Is that correct? psychologists?
Are they currently filled? I think we have someone
Not,
just returned from mat
present.
leave.
okay,
Do you know what? I don't have the answer to that, but what I will say and remind everyone and the public that when we're unable to fill during the school year, the budget is still in place. We do not remove it. What we do is we contract with Wishing Star, which has been what we have done in previous years, and do a catch up, so to speak, in the summertime to ensure that that money is spent each and every year.
and these are the people that would be responsible for administering psych eds.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to read a comment that I got from a member of the public. I feel like people say this kind of thing to me all the time, and so I want to discuss it here for the benefit of everyone. All right, so we're looking into getting a psych ed evaluation through the school, but I've recently heard that there's at least a 3-year wait list. Wondering if you know why there is such a huge wait list. I hear from parents in other school districts that they've been able to access psych ed evaluations in under a year. I feel like the kids who have to wait until grade 7 or 8 must have massive challenges, including emotional, mental health issues related to feeling like they are failing in school. So I didn't give you a heads up that I was going to be bringing this issue forward today. So if you're not prepared to speak to it, I understand, but I think we need to have this discussion publicly so people understand why.
Yeah, thank you. I feel we do try to have this discussion every year, especially through our Learning Services Department and information on our website under Learning Services and how it operates. And I think respectfully, this is my area. This is what I did for many years in my career. And I think there is often a misunderstanding. So I appreciate the opportunity and perhaps at another board meeting to go through this piece to be clear with folks what a psych ed is and what it isn't, what it results in and what it doesn't, because we know there are many families out there who believe that without a psych ed assessment, there will be no services for my child. And I'm exaggerating, but that is a common refrain that we hear. And again, I want to just assure everyone that in our district, you do not need a psych ed to get service. We have a universal approach to learning, a UDL approach, where we do our best to ensure all kids can access curriculum, and that those assistive devices, those pedagogies, those ways of teaching and learning that support neurodiverse learners are in place and are available. What psych eds are for at this moment in time, and we do know that the Ministry of Education is reviewing their special education manual, is to get a designation, which then results in the need for the requirement for an IEP. But again, if parents have concerns about their child's learning, they absolutely need to talk to their classroom teacher and principal, who can then provide assurances, a learning plan, etc., to meet those needs. Are there students who would have benefited from a psych ed assessment at an earlier date than we've been able to provide? Absolutely. I'm not going to deny that, because there are only so many psychologists out there that we access. But I really would like to assure the public that it is not the requirement of a psych ed that determines the services that you receive in school. And that advocacy and that communication and education for our families is something we continue to work on. And I know we have more work to do in that area. And I think for now, I'll leave it at that.
Can I just ask like 1 or 2 follow-up questions? So the first thing that I wanted to ask, and I think I know the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you need a diagnosis in place to have an IEP? Or is an IEP something that anyone can access if it's suspected that the child has needs?
Two answers to that, which is where it gets a little bit tricky. So the requirement of an IEP is a designation. However, what we would call it instead of an official IEP, because that can get confusing, is a student learning plan, is sort of an informal IEP. And yes, So when we're speaking with parents, we want to assure them that you should have a conversation about a student learning plan for their child as opposed to an IEP, because if they're just asking off the cuff, a teacher or principal may say, oh, no, IEPs, that's specific to a designation, but you can absolutely still have a student learning plan for your child so they understand their needs, learning style, etc., without a psych ed. And lastly, I'll say what we're working on for a number of years is that student portfolio, where within that we have my student strengths, how my student learns best, where they learn best, what supports they need to be successful. And we've really been working hard to say that's the place, because our belief is every child should have a personalized learning plan. And that those that require the formalized IEP will also have those. So it is definitely a work in progress.
Thank you so much, Chris. That's super helpful. And one thing I'll say out loud for the benefit of the public is if you were to have difficulty accessing some of the resources that Chris has talked about today, you could use the Navigating District Concerns policy and flowchart to get yourself towards where you are trying to be.
And I know that the subcommittee of DPAC, the Inclusion Committee, have been working with us very hard on providing some training for advocacy positions or liaison, I guess you could maybe a better term, for PACs, so that if a family, a parent has questions, concerns about their child's learning or any other thing they want to approach the school about, they'll have someone to speak to who's actually been trained to help navigate those concerns and be in community, in meetings with the parent. So we hope that, again, really helps parents feel that they're welcome to come to meetings. We want them to engage, and that we're here to listen. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to mention that.
I'm just noticing that we're getting really close to the end of this meeting, and this is an interesting conversation, but I don't think it particularly has a lot to do with finance. So it made me think, although it's a good
I'm sorry, I have
conversation
one more
to
thing.
have.
It does, please. I have one more.
It's a good conversation to have. And so I thought maybe could we put this on a list for a potential education session? Like understanding how IEPs are provided
idea.
to children, and just how IEPs and our learning plan and all of those things just all sort of fit together into our overall strategic plan.
Well, yes, and because
We can just- we don't have to
it's a good
discuss.
point to add this to a future board meeting, so it could be a staff presentation for the sake of the
Sure.
public as well, so they're able to.
Yeah, I think it'd be really meaningful, but maybe we can't like fulsomely discuss it right now.
So I just have one request of staff, if you could please report back to the board and let us know how our ratio of psychologists to children compares to other similar districts, just in a future meeting.
So I will ask, happy to do that, but I just want consensus or from the board, that's something they'd like staff to do.
And
Happy to, but just process.
thoughts?
Lennon, do you understand?
I support that.
Thank you.
Any information?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
April.
Yeah, I think we get into dangerous territory anytime we're looking and comparing between what happens in Sea to Sky and what happens in other districts. We could go down that road and we could keep our staff busy nonstop if we wanted to have a comparison of everything, every financial decision, every educational decision that we make as a school district. So I don't really see the value in checking out how much psychology time we have. Maybe Sea to Sky has different, Sea to Sky has very different values in how we approach inclusion and how we wrap around all students. And I think that, well, I know that other districts have different ways of handling that, even with what is written in their collective agreements. So many school districts in British Columbia have an actual number associated between how many how many students with IEPs can be in a classroom, for example? And if that doesn't happen, what kinds of funding are given back to teachers who take on extra children with IEPs? We don't have that. Thankfully, in my estimation, we don't, because it gives us an opportunity to wrap around all of our children. And I loved what Chris said about every student has its individual student learning plan. And I think I'm going to stop saying I think. I know that Sea to Sky is on the right path by doing that. And by comparing us with other districts isn't fair to us, isn't fair to them. We are who we are.
So you don't support?
I do not.
Okay, Melissa, has your hand up? No, it's not on the screen.
Well, I do need some direction because we want to ensure, in a democratic process and that the board is speaking with one voice and no one trustee gets to direct staff. I am happy to do whatever the majority of the trustees would like. Notwithstanding what you had said, this is not something that would take much time. So if you're worried about pressure on staff, I appreciate that. It's not a big job. So it's something we can do relatively quickly. It's really about, again, your ideology or your stance or your rationale for the ask. But I just want to ensure that I need 4 people to say either yay or nay.
Okay, well, it sounds like you're looking for a motion, but
I
I don't
am.
know that we really.
Maybe not
Need
here
one.
where that.
Lisa has her hand up.
May I know Celeste had another item that pertained to the budget. No, you're shaking your head. But I would like to say that I do feel that if we had a comparison, then we can put some parents' fears to rest. If I know when we personally were going through our IEP process in another school district, there was misconceptions and misinformation all over the place. And our son wasn't given one because he wasn't a behavioral problem, but the behavioral problem who got theirs ahead of ours, really his was a vision problem. And if they'd followed the steps we were told to follow, they would have just had the vision corrected and our son would have gotten what he needed sooner, whatever. But I think I seem to know from what I hear within the community that there's misconceptions, and anything we can do to dispel those for our school population, I think it's important. I think people knowing how they can get them privately, how they can get them through the school, that we are encircling all the children and helping them in the classroom, regardless of whether or not they've got the document or not. That's great language to be able to give to them. And I think having those tiny comparisons, whether it's 1 or 2 districts around the same size, around the same area, I think it would just help us communicate better with our students.
Okay, and I don't think that there was any objection in this room that I heard to producing that. We've had this conversation over the years. I've heard it many times saying that we do not need a designation. We do our best to work with the individual students as if everything comes up. Without the designation, I don't know that I see the benefit to knowing what other districts are doing. Their ratio, if we struggle to fill positions, I think that the ratio is irrelevant, really. It's like, okay, well, we can't hire for this because somebody's off. And then maybe, maybe it's as simple as that. So Cynthia just had her hand up, and I remind everyone we have 7 minutes until our committee of the whole starts. If we don't complete this agenda, then we're going to have to pick up at a later time tonight. Was it 2:15? I thought it was 2:30.
Yeah, the last, I think I agree with what April's saying. I think our district is unique in the way that we approach education and supporting all of our students. And so in this case, I'm not necessarily sure that doing a one-to-one comparison has any value. Other schools have different strategic plans that meet different types of needs. They have different demographics. I think the variables are too different from Sea to Sky to other places in this particular context to make that of any value. And I wonder if that's information that people can find out themselves by just going to school district websites and looking up who's on their staff.
So what is, sorry, completely aside from this, what is our process? I thought we started at 2:30. I didn't know it was 2:15. So what happens? We've gone over on this and we have a committee of the whole that we're late starting. So where do we go from here? What's the process?
Well, I think a lot of this topic isn't necessarily related to finance as well, so I don't know if you wanna maybe try to part this. I think we're gonna have to try and make it,
But we gotta pick it up when the public can pick it up with us. Correct. So it'll have to be after our
Or, yeah, or we had the agenda for a board meeting item and just speak to it and then. Again, staff, I'm happy to do what the board would like us to do.
Yeah.
But I don't
I'm
think we have-
wondering right now with this agenda, we're talking about something that isn't on the agenda. Per se, but although everything relates to finance, I get that. In one way, shape or form, but where are we with this particular agenda? Do we just have the one recommendation left to do? Do we have more conversation on finance? Yeah, go ahead.
The motion, you know, the essence of the motion is there, just have a vote. The next thing is the action item and then it's done. And then just move into, you know, take a 5-minute break and start a few minutes late.